Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to this Research Spotlight session, and where we will be exploring social impact of tourism and specifically social empowerment through tourism. Okay. I'm excited to share my latest research findings through this platform, and I appreciate your time and attention, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. So let's get started. We all love to travel at some point of time and taking a break and visiting different countries, right? And we often forget that your holiday destination is someone's home, and you, the traveler, are a guest in their home. And as a hosting destination and community, you are the guest in that particular you are the host in that particular country, and you can only invite that many tourists and visitors to the destination that you can accommodate as in your home and can feed and take care of. Okay, so keeping this analogy in mind, I would like us to reflect on what are some of the current pressing issues with tourism. Especially over tourism, you hear of a lot of destinations who are closing certain tourist activities as well as locations just because of over tourism in those destinations. And somewhere in the point that we often forget that the cultural and social aspects of tourism is not taken into consideration. Most tourism destinations tend to focus on the economic aspect and the environmental aspect, because now we can see the environmental damage a bit more clearly. So tourism, on the other hand, is very multidimensional, and it cut across a lot of disciplines. Okay, and yet, we tend to look at tourism as a business product and an industry, and that sort of offsets the real dimensional provisions of tourism. Most destinations tend to promote tourism on the basis of two planning approach, boosterism and economic approach. So boosterism is an approach which was used to promote tourism traditionally, and it tends to look at tourism as an industry, as a business sector, and the success indicators for the development of tourism was tourism numbers. So that's why you hear a lot of countries actually talking about their tourism destination and plans for tourism, indicating that we target 20 million tourists or 1 million tourists, And this was the oldest approach to tourism and planning. Then came the economic approach, which is a little adaptation of the boosterism approach. We were looking at the tourism as an economic sector, and the success indicators for tourism were mainly how much it contributed to the economy and how many jobs it generated. Okay? Then came all the issues of climate change, and we had certain impacts on tourism, and these environmental impacts brought tourism planners and environmentalists as the expert in this planning approach, and the success indicator for this approach was mainly environment mitigation. Okay? And especially in terms of how much can it mitigate some of the environmental challenges. The last two approach is what I specialize in, community-based tourism, that actually is developed in a sustainable form. And community-based tourism treats tourism or views tourism as not only having positive benefits but also negative benefits, and the fact that community residents should have a say in the tourism development happening in that destination. At the same time, it views the success indicators are community perspectives of well-being, not only the benefits in terms of economic aspect, but also how much it affects the community and impacts the community, and as well as sustainability indicators, which covers all the 4 pillars of sustainability, which is environment, economy, and the social aspects, as well as the cultural aspects. And here for sustainability, the indicators for tourism development is mainly the sustainability indicators, so which cut across all the domains and is more better representative of tourism planning and approach. And my focus is on culture and social aspects, and especially I'm looking at social empowerment. And there's a huge elements to tourism that is related to these 2 pillars of sustainability. So if we look at, social and cultural sustainability, they are the ones actually that contribute to helping local economies with, local communities with economic development and overall well-being. There are also some challenges in social and cultural sustainability, which is mainly pressing issues like resilience, marginalization, inequality that is faced by communities that actually are involved in tourism. So the way we can empower these community through, more involvement and participation is by addressing what are some of the challenges or reasons that contribute to negative impacts in tourism. If you look at some of those challenges, limited tourism knowledge and experience. Tourism is generally managed by a tourism board or a ministry of tourism, and usually this is the positions leading these ministries or tourism boards are political positions. They may have limited knowledge in terms of tourism, its planning approaches, and experience related to tourism. There are also no local tourism leaders, and external agents like multinational chains tend to dominate how tourism is planned and developed in that destination. And given that it is a multidimensional aspect, there's a whole lot of stakeholders involved in tourism, and these stakeholders have not really contributed to the fullest. For example, the communities, they have given the less powerful voice in terms of the tourism development, and these lead to the negative impacts. So my research that I would like to share today is based in Indonesia. It's about dolphin watching tourism as an instrument in delivering justice and social empowerment for marginalized artisanal fishers in Kiluan, Lampung, or Lampung province in Indonesia. This particular research was funded by an intercollaborative grant between JCU's campuses, and it involves my colleagues in Australia as well as an NGO organization called Citizen Sirenian Indonesia. And we looked at dolphin watching tourism amongst artisanal fishers in Indonesia. So fishing and fish in general is a source of livelihood and food for coastal communities. 95% of global artisanal fishers are actually artisanal fishers and marginalized. They're marginalized because of poverty. They're marginalized because they face injustices, because they're competing nowadays with large industrialized fishing companies. And because they are competing with them, they do not have access to certain areas for fishing, or they are endangered because of their well-being and extreme poverty being at stake. And though fishing communities have a cultural identity, and the artisanal fishers tend to fish in small scale and in smaller boats, and usually they look at providing for the local community. So in terms of artisanal fishers in the blue economic growth, they are usually sidelined. Yeah. So the blue economic growth actually, it kind of allows or promotes and emphasizes power relations, encourages competition, and benefits the influential elites, while artisanal fishers are sidelined. They're also marginalized in certain countries, facing eviction from coastal area because many large firms in tourism want to build hotels with lovely views of the sea. And they also have a huge number of child labor involved in tourism. This also is an element that is predominantly in artisanal fishers, because they don't have, they have a household of 6, so 5 to 6 members, and they have to support their household, and eventually the child is also included in the labor. So capitalistic aspects of blue growth actually led to this critique and call for blue justice, which is a counter narrative to blue economic growth, and it actually highlights the plight of artisanal fishers and highlights the plight of their tensions and the conditions that they live in. So most of them live under poverty, but poverty is best expressed through the opinions of those living in poverty and their reality. And in fact, for the artisanal fishers, poverty and poor well-being and no access to education, health issues, and lack of infrastructure are some of the foremost anxieties, even more than fishing rights and access and depleting resources of fish. So artisanal fishers often they adopt tourism as a supplementary income or livelihood. So dolphin watching tourism also provides a lot of direct and indirect jobs, and it's close occupationally to fishing, because they could use the same boat for taking out tourists, and it provides immediate cash and nutrition requirements when compared to other livelihoods like agriculture, which is also something that artisanal fishers adopt. Yet tourism can actually pose certain risk and social risk, as well as other risk, and tourism in any justice focus needs to benefit the host community in particular by supporting their rights and their needs. So eventually it will also contribute to the sustainable development goals like reduced inequality and peace and justice and strong institutions, as well as life below water. So the question is, does dolphin watching tourism socially empower or disempower artisanal fishers? And this is where our research comes in. And empowering is conceptualized as a construct that connects strengths, capabilities, support systems, and practical performance to a social change or policy, and it links individual well-being to larger settings of the society, like economic, political, and social settings. And theories in social empowerment actually emphasize that the process, that is the actions taken, and the outcome or results could empower, and it's an ongoing process rather than a result or an outcome. So when it comes to literature, a lot of studies point out that local communities anticipate tourism actually encourages development and social progress and provides economic benefit. But there is a lucrative side to tourism, and over-dependence on tourism and exploitive operations can actually disempower the communities. And tourism without planning or over-promoted, uncontrolled, can lead to degrading quality of life for local communities, especially if the planning approach is based on boosterism or economic approach. So tourism's role as a social force that transforms capacity, especially in marginalized context, needs further research to reinforce this phenomenon. So grounded in social empowerment theories and notions of power and justice and eventually social sustainability, we are looking at the framework that can support such a study. So our study is based in Kiluan Bay, as I mentioned, and Kiluan Bay was chosen because it's also one of the seven tour dolphin watching tour regions in Indonesia, and it's also identified by Indonesian Tourism Board for the post-COVID-19 tourism recovery, economic recovery. It is a year-round activity in Kiluan Bay, and Kiluan Bay actually consists of 1,372 residents, according to the data in 2019, and out of which 105 fishers, mostly male, are sharing 70 boats, and 80% of them undertake dolphin watching tourism as an alternate, as a supplementary livelihood. And also because it's a year-round activity, the spinner dolphins and resource dolphins are the species that you can sight, and they are undertaken in the traditional fishing boats, so fishermen do not have to have any additional capital invested in this activity, and they take 3 persons per capacity in one of those wooden boats, but it's motorized, so it involves petrol as well. And there are 3 tours that are conducted per day, and the cost of the tour is $19, and petrol is around $4 US dollars. And because the dolphins can be sighted mostly in the morning during early hours like 6 a.m., there was a need for tourists to stay over in Kiluan whenever they arrived because it was too early to travel there. So many of the fishermen actually extended their tourism activities to homestays. So they started extending their homes for tourists to come and stay. And because there's not many hotels in this region, it worked out very well for them as a community-based tourism activity, while the community, the local suppliers, were the main tourism suppliers. And there are close to 45 homestays. 20 homestays are listed on the internet, and the remaining 25 are listed, and remaining 20 we noted during our observations at that particular destination. And basically this is one of the tour areas, and in Lampung there are other areas as well where dolphin watching is popular. So in terms of our research methodology, we actually place this research through philosophical assumptions of a transformatic paradigm and qualitative methodological approach. And we looked at collecting data through 3 visits to the location. The first one was exploring the village and the surrounding and trying to get access to our interview participants and building that social bond. And stage 2 and 3, we interviewed 41 artisanal fishers and 36 homestay owners. And we used snowball sampling as a way of collecting our participants because it fitted nicely with, reaching out for participants as well as, trust in the community. And we also backed it up with some opportunistic sampling where we met certain random fisher communities who lived in Kilwan Bay, and we interviewed them as well. The interviews were close to 40 to 60 minutes, and it tend to look at fishing households, their involvement in tourism, and empowerment through tourism. We also analyzed the data using, the outcome and process of empowerment of suggested by Skivens 2000, and basically focusing on responsiveness of the state institutions, sense of pride, and improvement in quality of life. And most of the fishers we interviewed were male fishers because predominantly they were male fishers, but women were not ignored in this activity. They did play a role as well. In fact, they were the ones who were playing the supportive roles. They provided souvenirs, food and beverage, and they sorted fishes as well as, they supported explaining about the local region, and mostly in the homestays as well. So some of our key critical observations and discussions from the region was that Kilwan Bay had a nice blend of native locals and migrants, but from the other parts of Indonesia. And majority of these depended on a single income, that is fishing, and they had households of 6 members, and the money wasn't sufficient because the catch of fish has decreased a lot, by almost 20 to 40% as per the fishermen, and this was because of climate change again and unpredictable weather conditions. And there was also competition from industrialized fishers who actually blocked, certain regions only for industrialized fishing and did not allow artisanal fishers to reach to these points. Climate change also affects the fishers immensely because dolphin watching tourism is also involving the boat and going out to the sea. So if unpredictable weather, sometimes that can also stop other maritime activities. So the local community are the tourism suppliers, and this is what was the best part of Kilwan. It is at a stage where it is planned and developed according to community-based tourism approach, where community is the main tourism supplier. And tourism is generally perceived very well positively by the fishing community because the income that they earned was helpful, but it was still ordinary, and because of the less promotion as well as climate change that led very few tourists to go to this region. But farming was another supplementary livelihood, and many of them were actually involved in all 3 livelihoods to survive. But they generally felt tourism is good and it makes their life better, and it provided an alternative career for them. There was this nice sense of social cohesion that was evident among the local community, and as someone who has researched on social cohesion and tourism's role in being a catalyst for social cohesion. In my PhD, I was very keen on this aspect. There were 105 fishers, and they actually shared the boats, and they shared 70 boats among themselves to take tourists. And they even shared the revenue from dolphin watching tourism. If one family is starving, or if one family doesn't have enough support money, they have loans, for example, buying these fishing boats to use it in their fishing purpose. So they actually even shared revenue. They went fishing in groups to save fuel, and they participated in collective communal activities to promote tourism through their village gotong royong, which is their Indonesian cultural practice of communal service to for mutual assistance. And they felt tourism actually increased community efforts because they came together, and there was this pride. Okay, Kiluan Bay is our home, and we are promoting this to the travelers from outside, and it strengthened family, and it strengthened in absence of jealousy. And it was nice to see this social cohesion among the fishers. They also felt that it actually contributed to huge infrastructure development. They said it got roads to the village, drainage was improved, they built bridges, and had even public spaces for leisure activities, which was built, which wasn't there prior to this place being recognized as a tourism space, even to the extent of getting telephone, electricity, and internet access to the village, which was not there prior to tourism. So it actually helped in this infrastructure development. And through the interaction between tourists, it was very interesting to see that they learned certain skills. So there was passive learning involved, They learned surfing, snorkeling, diving, turtle conservation, and also how to use the social media to promote. And this was new for the fishermen, and they also felt that tourism helped in improving their access to education. For example, many households with 6 members could not afford to send their children to local government schools, even though there were government schools, because they had to support, and everyone had to actually contribute to the income. So tourism revenue helped in educating their children outside the village. It was always this dream of sending their children outside the village. And also they had investment for as money as an investment for their children's future education. The other aspect was the passive learning of learning English and Italian, So when they saw us, or so they saw other, tourists coming in, they would use their language skills, because it's something that they picked up, and they learned about different cultures from each other, and even they improved in their cuisines and how to provide service and hospitality, service quality, because of this interaction between the tourists. And they were very proud to show that we didn't have to conduct the interviews in solely Malay, but we can actually speak a little bit of English. And they also learned surfing and wanted to start surfing schools, but they were not supported in it. So they were improved social position as well because of tourism. Some of the fishermen commented on how they have become famous now because, they are homestay owners, and they own dolphin watching tour. And this was, opposed to what existed prior, where they were just called fishermen, and they felt that their identity was not very well recognized because of, large industrial fishing companies and other parties. So they also felt that, the homestay made them, strengthened their identities and boosted their confidence. They had this sense of pride in undertaking dolphin watching tour because it was not a completely new skill for them, because they were familiar with the sea. They knew where the dolphins were, they knew where the fishes were, so they had more knowledge having spent time in the sea. And in fact, their anxieties and whatever problems or stressing elements had reduced because of tourism and strengthening of their identities. And the other sense of pride and in terms of practicing dolphin watching tourism was the fact that they had actually been able to become a organization together on their own. However, we observed that on our visit, during our observations, that the infrastructure needed more improvement. There were potholes on the road. At the same time, there was low response from state institutions, to provide opportunities to participate. Training was very random, and training was dominated by conservation efforts, or in terms of just providing training in language. That was the only main training they received, and they felt it was not accessible because it was at a time that they were out fishing, or they were involved in the tour activities. So also it was not certified, so they felt that because it's not certified, they could not go further for tourism education, for example, if they want to go further and use it as a career path. And some perceived the training was selective, only to those who are friendly with the state authorities and the state bodies, and it was not equal to all. So there was a little bit of inequality in terms of access to training. Majority of the artisanal fishers were not asked or involved in decision making in terms of tourism planning and development. So this is almost a mixture, as I had enforced earlier regarding the tourism planning approach, where community-based tourism is supposed to involve the residents, and the local residents were the expert when it comes to community-based tourism. Here they were not invited much, and they were not involved in the decision making, but there was a community-based tourism happening in Kiluan, irrespective of it, and only a few were selected across the year to contribute to decision making. So there's additional income that addressed some of the foremost social and well-being anxieties of the fishers. It didn't require additional investment, and loans that the fishers took out were paid through this tourism revenue. Familiarity with the sea actually helped in strengthening their identity as dolphin watching tour operators, and the bonding to share resources and revenue created a lot of networks where they were doing a lot of cultural activities as well, collectively as a community, and it helped in bringing in this poverty elevation as well. But based on these critical, observations and discussion, we had certain implications that we wanted to suggest. And one of it is basically more support from the government through flexible and accessible training for the community, financial support for the cost of, safe and proper fishing vessels, because these were actually bought by the fishermen, taking loans from the government, investment from the local agencies to support marketing, and most importantly, further studies to understand the impact that climate change, commercial fishing is having on this particular community, especially for women. We actually wanted to go and interview women folk involved in tourism. However, the study was in midst of, the COVID pandemic, and we could not go back to them. But if funded further, we intend to go and look at the women who are carrying the extra burden, because they are cooking, they're cleaning, they're maintaining the homestay just like any other hotel, but at the same time, they're not compensated and they bear the additional burden. And also, we felt that the training was required in beyond marketing and financial. In fact, it was required in hospitality skills as certified programs. So if they want to advance further, there is a pathway for it. And sustainable education was also essential for dolphin watching tours, because there is a negative impact if boats go very close to the dolphins, and that might affect the dolphins' feeding pattern and their resting patterns. So future studies can focus on impact of dolphin watching tourism to the dolphins. Tourist perspective, for example, the cost being $19 for a dolphin watching tour was conceptualized by these, artisanal fishers. But maybe we may want to ask tourists how much are they willing to pay for such an activity, because it involved sea at the same time, even for the homestays, it is quite a bit that can be done. Women actually, their voices need to be represented in the fishing community. They do a lot of the additional supportive work. The men go fishing, tour, activity, and the women are the one who actually sell the fish or clean and get activities, to be done in terms of promoting the fish catch as well as the dolphin activities. So also there's been a lot of research currently regarding climate change and its, how it affects women in such communities. So we would like to see research in this area as well. So in conclusion, critical observations confirm that there is a huge adequate potential of social empowerment of the fishers who have adopted dolphin watching tourism despite the hurdles, but more support is needed for this community, and it actually helps in improving their quality of life, well-being, and the ability to make more choices in terms of the income also that comes in through. But we would want to see more supportive role from the state institutions. And in fact, the NGO that was part of our research is taking this forward by representing, giving a report to the government on how this community can be supported. So stories are very powerful in telling, how tourism activities happen in different destinations and what are the impacts from it. And my advocacy for social and cultural sustainability does not end with me and my research, but also taken up actively by our scholars, HDR scholars in tourism. ZV looks at cultural sustainability of the Dai dance community in China. And Joel looks at the cultural space of museums and how digitalization in museum is affecting social collective memory. So to end that, thank you so much for listening. Before I wrap up, I would like to extend my heartfelt thank you to also Iman and Nicole, who have been part of organizing this session, and I'm happy to take any questions you have. Also, you can post it on Slido.
Thank you. Thanks, Zilmiyah. I love your approach and addressing the sustainability goals. But with respect to that, there's a lot of still, obviously, inequity here, not accessible to training selectiveness.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering also, is the community at risk of potentially being overtaken by just yet another large group who now sees, wow, they're being successful at dolphin watching, maybe we should get on board with that. So if there's no regulation around it, how susceptible are they to having somebody pounce in and overtake them in that way as well?
Yeah, very interesting question. Thank you for that one. In fact, it was also our concern, to begin with, because it's also been, Kilwan Bay is recognized as one of the 7 main dolphin watching tour location, and there are no proper dolphin active watching organizations involved at the moment. There aren't even many hotels involved at the moment, and everything is very much community based. So there is a concern that, because of the lucrative nature of tourism, we would still soon start seeing organizations stepping in once it's successful. But this is where I started that, your destination in someone's home. And we really need to look at how many tourists do we let access, or how much tourism development should happen in that location, in terms of building hotels. Countries currently, they have all, tried trial and run era of strategies to address it. Some have given, most of them, in fact, have increased tourist fees to, visa fees and stuff. But this again sort of secludes the community that would actually go and stay in a homestay, So there is this concern, and obviously inequality is there in terms of, access to education and training. And this is what we would like to bring out to the Tourism Development Board through the NGO that is working and officially registered in Indonesia.
Sorry, if I can, because I had another follow-on with that one, and still relating to the sustainable approach, that it's fantastic that the community is seeing the benefits from this already, but every time you see something lucrative, then it's a temptation to follow the money, right? Yeah. And so if there's no regulation and the government really isn't getting on board, and we want the community to be empowered, who empowers them to be able to say no to lucrative offers and to stop, we might say, well, it's not great moving forward for hotels to be built there, but who's to say that that's not still their decision?
Yeah.
And if they can see the benefit of it, at what point do you stop? It's a dilemma. I can see how you're interested in this one.
Yes, it is a dilemma, to say so. Actually, it is very lucrative, and because it is successful, there would be a lot of people who would eventually move over. And this was visible even in the demographic, because we see migrants from other parts of Indonesia joining in. But they have moved like 30 years ago, so you don't know. You can't call them migrants, but again, it's going to attract, and there should be some way that they can, empower the community to be on board in the decision making. And this is the very aspect of community-based sustainable tourism. If they are not given that power to voice, okay, we don't need this much tourism, or we don't need this tourism active development, or infrastructure development in place, it would take away the beauty of that place. If they can voice that out, then it would really help. But like I mentioned in the earlier part of my talk, a lot of countries still focus on boosterism and economic aspect of, planning and developing tourism. They only still talk about tourism numbers, in terms of being a success indicator for the tourism development. And tourism numbers is like the worst one. Even, in fact, economic contribution still helps, but tourism numbers is like, if you look at places like Venice, for example, there's a lot of tourist cruise ships coming in. 10 million, 20 million tourists arrive. They pay the cruise operator for their, accommodation and most likely food and beverage because they are also staying in that place. So they just step out to Venice, which is a delicate city, to buy cheap souvenir that may not be made in Venice as well, and sightsee and create more crowd at these delicate locations of heritage, So unless the residents are powered, then there is no way of, controlling it, So you need to bring them on to the decision-making platform. Venetians have taken this on their own, they've started protesting. You see that in Barcelona, you see, even in as close as Bali, where people were protesting and there were certain beaches that were closed for tourist activity, so it's kind of still happening, but it's happening not by giving the official voice and platform for them to, make a point. And that should happen in order to control and, to maintain tourism, empowering the communities. Okay. Yeah. Okay, there's some more questions. So, how should the government intervene to fix this? Number one, empower the voice, get residents to be representatives. We are not talking about a political leader that, who represents Kiluan region, but actually artisanal fishing community members, who can actually come on board and discuss any ways to promote, any ways to manage tourism, at the same time training, as well as control challenges, which will affect them in particular. And very interesting presentation. Thank you. What would be your advice and some infrastructure recommendation in terms of planning strategies for this community? Okay, the first thing has to be with the roads and accessibility, because there were a lot of potholes on the roads leading to Kiluan Bay, but the Kiluan residents, they did not mention much of it. We noted this through our observations because they were quite happy that finally we have roads, finally we have electricity, finally we have a proper drainage system. So maybe we need to bring all this on board, With the advent of AI, VR tech, how would you think it would further enhance, diminish the sustainability of the local community? Interesting. Okay, when we say AI and VR, it would be great if, if it actually helps in some sustainability elements. Like, for example, maybe we could look at sighting dolphins so that we know what's the distance, and we can, in that sense, try to compensate for the negative impact on the dolphin itself. There could be access or platform to identify, who are the fishers who are on board and who are the fishers who are actually, who are involved in homestays, so that they can go and identify these people. Because like I said in the beginning, not all of them were registered online, so you didn't know how many homestays there are. Sometimes it's also good to keep digitalization away from such a beautiful community-based tourism that exists, Increasingly, what happens is a lot of the funding and a lot of, also a lot of, I would say, emphasis is given to bringing in technology to that destination. But we may want to ask the residents, do they want technology in the first place? Maybe it might help sustainability, like I said, with the dolphins. But also what's important is to bring out tourism planning approach discussions, providing platform. Maybe we can use platforms to get their voices. That could be one element, but we wouldn't want to spoil something that is so beautifully set up on its own without, support from the government. So I would be a little aloof, at the same time see where, it can really support sustainably. Yeah. Any other? Yeah. All right.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm just curious as to the size of Kiluan Bay. I couldn't really tell from the map. So what's the size and what's the size of the community? I'm thinking if one day everybody moves out, then there's no need to do any tourism around there. Or one day if the dolphins were to move away.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the sustainability of that place.
Okay, it is a very small, place. It's not a huge location. I don't have the exact figure of the area, but, it has only 1,372 residents. So you can see how small scale this is. But at the same time, Kiluan Bay is on the migration path of the dolphins. So they are always, around that area, and especially it's because it's a year-round activity, they're always sighted in this area. But this is why we must also look at studies that negatively impact the dolphins, If all the boats go, close to the dolphins, it might actually chase the dolphins. But this is their habitat, and also it's on their migrating path. So that's one aspect. Yeah. But because it's an activity that's happening positively, it's currently sustainable. But you're right, if they disempower and if there is less support from the state institutions, eventually this could be a challenge.
Yeah. Thank you for the study.
Thank you.
My question relates to the last questions, the sustainability of the community itself. I was thinking of the young people who go to school, and would they one day really abandon that kind of living, being a fisherman, although dolphin tourism brings benefits to the community, but there are other bigger attractions in the city, they will decide that that's not my way of life.
Yeah, very interesting question. In fact, we kind of, it came out in our interviews while we were talking to the fishermen. A lot of young children, they want to go study outside Kiluan region, get a degree and, move out. Some, they said that because of tourism, they actually felt it is attractive to stay there. So they have now plans, entrepreneurial projects that they want to start up, in Kiluan itself. But I think this is something that has happened in many sectors, not only here. I mean, agrarian societies as well, we've moved from there and we moved on to industrial and, service economies, and now we are facing food security challenges. So eventually this could be a challenge, but I think main is providing that training and making it an attractive career to an appeal to the younger would help.
I have so many questions on this one. It's fascinating. With respect to the training, because you said it's random and selective, but what sort of training, and is it training that the fishers themselves are asking for? Is it training that people are suggesting this is what you need if you want to advance in tourism? Because the problem that if you start from not knowing a field such as tourism, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you should know. Yeah. And you can't ask the questions, and you can't ask for training that could be really relevant to you. And I see that you said they've been learning just from the people who have been visiting, but is that the best type of learning necessarily? Because we could see Italian coffee shops springing up all over the place, I don't know, or surfing shops. Mm-hmm. So what sort of training is it, and where is it led from? Who's suggesting what training would be available?
Okay. Okay. Again, very interesting. In fact, the training that's happening is proposed by the government. So they realize, like I said in the beginning, climate damage and economic damage is so clear. So people put efforts and priority towards it. So they are actually organizing training for turtle conservation, as well as they are also organizing training for sustainability of working with dolphins and English and language communication. But this is not the when it comes to hospitality operations, providing quality service, these are aspects that are missing from their training, and as well as promotion. So it's the tourist who is actually inspiring the fishermen to promote online, whereas some of the fishermen said, it might be expensive to promote, so I don't want to advertise because I will incur a cost. So by showing that they could use these digital platforms and how they can use it. And you not only register online, but you can actually use platforms like booking.com, to register as a homestay and, get that potential, this thing. So I think they need support in terms of hotel and hospitality operations. Okay. How much further can they do in terms of, like, for example, traditional souvenirs? Make use of the handicrafts that they already are involved in and help them sell those to tourists. And also, in terms of housekeeping, simple, they're actually providing accommodation, but they're not trained in housekeeping. They're not trained in food and beverage operations, They're not trained in the actual hospitality and tourism operations, but they're being trained in conservation. They're being trained in language and communication skills, and that's about it. So there's a need for training in terms of even how to conduct tours. What are the things that you can point out? Maybe there are locations that they aren't aware of that is listed as a tourist attraction and could be pointed out to tourists. So there's a need for tourism and hospitality oriented training in particular. Yes.
Yeah, I don't mean what I say. So the question I'm asking is not what I meant or mean. So here's the question. Why are we disturbing the dolphins? Number one, because in many places, including in Cebu, another popular place, literally they bring the tourists to the killer whales, and then not the killer whales, whale sharks, yeah, and they literally let go people into the sea, and they are told not to touch the whale sharks, but they still touch. So there's no such thing as inverted commas sustainability in the context of how we prevent or mitigate. Though these people were educated for 30 minutes, watched the TV, on how to treat the wildlife, and then brought on the boat, and then the boatman allows them to do the thing. So I'm not sure in Klung they allow such a thing. That's number one. Why do we disturb the dolphin? Leave them alone. Yeah. No tourism. Number two, why do we need all this infrastructure? Because, the more you build, the more land, the more trees you're going to cut down, the more, things that you're going to make way for modernity. Yeah. Do these people want to modernize? I'm sure they do. But is that the way to move forward for this community? Okay. Yeah, because I remember as a kid, Sentosa wasn't the way it was. There was nothing there. It was just go there, swim, and go into the bushes or the trees, change, and then off we came back by a ferry. There's nothing, no bus, no nothing. But today it's a spoiled island, at least for a native. I wonder how many people would feel that way. So this is just an antithesis of what you have said. And I don't mean what I say.
No, thank you. Very interesting discussion. In fact, dolphin watching as it is practiced in Kiluan is completely different. They don't even allow the boats to go very close because they feel that, the fishermen, at least, this is the perspectives of the fishermen, they felt that sometimes having boats closer will reduce the fish also in that area because they're also fishing and they're doing dolphin watching, tourism. They're excited to ensure that we are not driving away the fish. At the same time, dolphin watching is done from far. And the wooden boats, these are like not many tourists can go on it, and they're only doing it like 3 tours a day. Again, infrastructure. Currently, it is only roads and public spaces that is being improved. So there is no particular hotel even being built in this region, So this is why, in fact, as I had discussed with Denise, it's good to have the tourist the community residents on board in decision making so that they can pause where and when needed in terms of, sustaining the whole development in that region. Of course, why disturb the dolphins? We don't want to really disturb the dolphins in their sense, but it is exciting. It is a tourist attraction. If people are not on board, there will still be tourists flocking over, and they may do this on their own. And who better can actually be cautious about the dolphin is mainly the fisher folks, because this is their identity and this is where they live, So as long as we don't have any other commercial development happening in that space, it's good. Otherwise, it can affect, But this is why another thing that we recommended in our paper is policies in terms of, restriction of the distance between the dolphin and the boats, and what activities actually should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. Even getting up on the boat to take nice selfies is not allowed, apparently, to one of the fishermen. So they're kind of aware. But yes, the policies and state institutions have to bring this on as law in order to, enforce it. Hope that answers your question. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much, and I want to thank everyone who have attended today, and especially in terms of taking your time to come in and sit for the session. I want to help the great organizing team, Iman and Nicole. Could you please help in doing the online poll for those online, and also the survey that's there. And our volunteers, wonderful volunteers, and they're my students in tourism. Thank you very much.